Part 25. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 241. Guyunjiao prepared some portable pills on her body, and also brought a food box specially prepared by Osman thus, and Ahu brought a few water bags. After all these things were done, she went into the house to get her kite. As soon as he came out with the kite, he ran into Laoju head on. I saw Laoju's hair was neatly combed, he was dressed in new clothes, and his beard was shaved. He looked 20 years younger. Guyunjiao looked at him, pursed her lips and smiled. Laoju tugged at his clothes uneasily. "Master, isn't it weird that I look like this?" Guyunjiao smiled. "What's weird? It's pretty good, I really can't see it. Laoju looks really handsome after cleaning up. Looks young too." Laoju touched his head embarrassedly. "Does it really look young?" Guyunjiao nodded affirmatively. Laoju laughed, walked over to the kitchen, and looked in from the window. Suddenly, Guyunjiao understood. It turns out that spring has come, and the peach blossoms are blooming. Zhang Yuzi came over at this time, took the kite from Guyunjiao's hand, and the two walked out. Walking to the shop in front, Guyunjiao glanced at the corner and shouted, "Young Master Lin, come with us." This is what Ahu asked her to ask her yesterday, saying that she wanted Linshuo to go out for a walk, and she would feel better. Linshuo only thought that Guyunjiao had asked herself to be the guard, so she got up and came out. Two carriages were parked outside. Guyunjiao took Yingzi and Sanya in one car, and Zhang Yuzi took Liaolang and Gu Chuan in another car. Linshuo drove for Guyunjiao and the others. When passing by the dim sum shop, Zhang Yuzi sent the servant down to buy some dim sum before continuing on. The carriage went out of the city gate and walked for half an hour before reaching the place. Guyunjiao got out of the car and took a look. The peach forest could not be seen at a glance. The peach blossoms had already bloomed halfway. From a distance, it looked like a pink and white cloud fell on the riverside. And the peach forest is close to the river embankment, and there is a large open space with sparse weeds growing on the ground. Perhaps there are too few places to play around Xiangcheng, and many carriages have been parked on the roadside. In the peach forest, Yingying Chaokuo can also be seen full of tourists. After a few children got out of the car, they pointed to the open space. "Let's fly kites over there." Children don't know how to see the scenery, they just like to eat and play. Guyunjiao took Sanya and Yingzi's hands towards the empty space. Maybe it's almost March 3rd, and the wind by the river is a bit strong. Lu Lang held the kite and ran against the wind. Zhang Yuzi only pulled the line to his knees, and the Harrier kite flew up. Zhang Yuzi quickly lengthened the wire. Seeing that Gu Chuan next to him was impatient, he handed the wire to him to hold. Gu Chuan was taken a few steps by the kite. Guyunjiao was already eager to try it. Seeing Zhang Yuzi coming over, she hurriedly said, "Sanlang, help me fly the kite." She has never flown a kite since she was a child. No matter how much her grandparents dote on her, when she is old, she never thinks of it at all. Zhang Yuzi smiled and said, "Then you run with your kite, and I'll help you lay the line." There is skill in laying out the line, and his skill is just right. Zhang Yuzi first corrected Guyunjiao how she was holding her, and then said, "Just run, and I will let go, and you will let go." Guyunjiao nodded excitedly, held the kite and ran out. Zhang Yuzi quickly placed the coil and suddenly shouted, "Let go." As soon as Guyunjiao let go, the beauty kite staggered into flight. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 242. One of Zhang Yu pulled the string, and the kite flew higher. Guyunjiao looked up, watching the beauty like herself flying in the wind in the sky. She was indescribably happy. She was next to Zhang Yuzi on the runway, learning to fly the coil and control the direction of the kite. Sanya and Yingzi next to her were envious, but the two girls were used to being obedient and sensible at home, so they didn't dare to say it. Gu Yunjiao lowered her head, saw the envious eyes of the two of them, and hurriedly handed the coil to Sanya. She rested for a while, seeing Linchuo's eyes staring at the children. She went to Dylan with peace of mind. She hasn't seen flowers yet. Zhang Yuzi exchanged a wink with Linchuo, and followed Gu Yunjiao into the peach forest. There is a faint fragrance of peach blossoms in the peach forest, and there is a strong fragrance of fat powder. Gu Yunjiao looked up at Peach Blossom. Zhang Yuzi was half a step behind her. The distance between the two was a little subtle. They seemed to be together, and they seemed to be passers-by. At this time, several women walked towards him. All eyes fell on Zhang Yuzi. One of the women stared at Zhang Yuzi for a while, her cheeks reddening unconsciously. She suddenly threw the peach blossom branch in her hand into Zhang Yuzi's arms, and then looked at him shyly. Another woman next to her, as if competing with her, threw the sachet in her hand into Zhang Yuzi's arms. Seeing the bold actions of these girls, Gu Yunjiao couldn't help covering her mouth and chuckling. She looked back at Zhang Yuzi, and saw that he took a step back with an expressionless face, and the peach blossom branch and the sachet fell to the ground. The two girls were not angry either, looked at Zhang Yuan with nostalgia, and walked to the side. Gu Yunjiao waited for the girl to leave, then turned around and smiled. Sanlang, you don't understand the style. Zhang Yuzi changed the subject. How about I pick a peach blossom for you? Gu Yunjiao looked at the peach blossoms on the branches and shook her head. I still don't pick them, everyone picks them, and the people who come after will have nothing to see. The two were talking when suddenly a voice came from the side. Brother Zhang? Yuzi. Zhang Yuzi and Gu Yunjiao turned their heads at the same time, and saw Zheng Juren standing not far away with his little servant looking surprised. Gu Yunjiao still had some impressions of this man. She seemed to be Saburo's classmate, and even visited him at home. She thought for a while, bowed slightly to Zheng Juren, and then stepped forward. Zhang Yuzi glanced at the direction where Gu Yunjiao left, and bowed his hands to Zheng Juren. Why is brother Zheng here? Zheng Juren looked at him up and down. This is exactly what I want to ask. Why are you in Xiangcheng? And, your leg? Zhang Yuzi knew that it was too late to pretend to be Lame. Then he said casually, the legs are almost healed. Brother Zheng has moved to Xiangcheng now. Zheng Juren's eyes flickered. I'm here to do something. Brother Zhang, what about you? I, of course, came to study. Zheng Juren raised his brows high. Could it be that brother Zhang has already entered the Wulu Academy? Zhang Yuzi nodded. This matter will not be a secret. As long as Zheng Juren goes to Wulu Academy to inquire, he will know. He might as well be frank. Zheng Juren suddenly exaggeratedly smiled and said, Aya, congratulations to brother Zhang, he's a Jiang, brother. Brother Zhang is already talented, and now he has entered the Wulu Academy again, and he will definitely be named in the gold list in the future. Zhang Yuzi shook his head and sighed. Brother Zheng, you and I have been in a small county for a long time. How could you know that Wulu Academy hides dragons and crouching tigers? I'm in the academy now, and I can only barely get a second class. I'm afraid it will be difficult to pass the imperial examination. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 243. Zheng Juren said with a smile, it's not impossible, with your talent, sooner or later you will have to go to high school. By the way, just now I saw a woman walking with you, that's you. Zheng Juren had actually recognized Gu Yunjiao. Compared with the last time he saw her at Jiang's house, she was better off. The body seems to have grown taller, the chest is bulging, and the face is even more delicate and beautiful like a peach blossom. It made my heart itch when I saw it. Zhang Yuzi answered quickly, that's the female family member of the family. After he finished speaking, he cupped his hands and said, Brother Zheng, I still have to take care of my family. Why don't you and I invite you another day? After speaking, he hurried forward. Zheng Juren looked at his back for a long time, his eyes narrowed. Gu Yunjiao had already left. She was born without a sense of direction, and at this moment she didn't know where to go to be the direction of the riverside. However, it was still early, so she was not in a hurry to go out, and just strolled in the peach forest. Zhang Yuzi left Zheng Juren and went to find Gu Yunjiao. He originally thought that Gu Yunjiao didn't go very far, but who knew that he walked in two directions without seeing her. He became anxious for a while, and looked in another direction. At this time, several women approached. One of the women was wearing a pomegranate red shirt, with an off-white and gold-sprinkled shawl on her shoulders. She suddenly saw Zhang Yuzi, and her eyes instantly became bright. She smiled suddenly, wrapped the fruit in her hand in a handkerchief, and threw it towards Zhang Yuzi. Zhang Yuzi suddenly saw something flying over, and when he stepped back, both the veil and the fruit fell to the ground. He was in a hurry to find Gu Yunjiao, but he didn't pay much attention, and stepped on the veil with one foot. The girl in the red shirt looked at the black footprint on her pink embroidered handkerchief, and said angrily, "This person is so rude." She instructed the maid next to her, "Go and find out, see what this person's name is and where he lives." "Humph, it's fine if he doesn't take this girl's veil. He even stepped on it, and he doesn't take this girl seriously." The maid nodded and ran after Zhang Yuzi. Another girl in a light yellow shirt next to her smiled slowly, "What if you asked for the name of that son? Although your son is beautiful, he is wearing a cotton robe, so he must be from a poor family." She covered her mouth with a veil and smiled, "Your father won't let you marry a poor man." The girl in red stomped her feet, "Humph, I didn't want to marry him. He stepped on my veil to insult me. This girl is going to give him a hard lesson." The maid chased Zhang Yuzi for a long time and saw him talking to a girl. She didn't know who to ask, so she had to follow them not far or near. Until the two left the peach forest, the maid was still watching from the edge of the peach forest. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded behind her, "What is the girl looking at?" The maid looked back to see that it was a man, and hummed, "Don't worry about it." Zheng Juren smiled, "Could it be that the girl is looking at that son?" The maid widened her eyes, "Do you recognize him?" Zheng Juren smiled coquettishly, "Naturally recognize it. This person is a student of Yuelu Academy. His surname is Zhang and his name is Yuzi." The maid got the quasi letter. Without saying thank you, she happily carried her skirt and ran away. The maid was also smart and ran to the side of her carriage, where the woman in red and yellow were sitting in the carriage. She said what Zheng Juren said. The woman in the yellow shirt covered her mouth exaggeratedly, "Oh, it's actually a student of Yuelu Academy, so he must be extraordinary. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jinkui. Chapter 244. The red-shirt woman's previous annoyance was all gone, just a thoughtful expression. The yellow-shirt woman's eyes flashed and she said with a smile, "Cousin, since this young master is a student of Yuelu Academy, he must have a bright future. Even if he is poorer now, it doesn't matter. Why don't you go back and talk to your uncle?" The red-shirt woman's lips curled imperceptibly. "Cousin said something nonsense," I said, "I'm going to trouble him." She impatiently instructed the maid, "Why don't you leave? I'm almost exhausted, hurry back." The carriage left quickly. Gu Yunjiao saw that the children were also tired from playing. Although she ate a lot of dim sum, she was unable to fill her stomach, so she decided to go home. Zheng Juren sat in his carriage and lifted the curtain of the window to watch. When he saw Gu Yunjiao getting into the carriage, he instructed the driver, "Follow the carriage with the blue roof in front of me, don't lose it." The driver agreed, and when he saw that the car was moving, he followed closely. Lin Chuo drove the car all the way back to the city. Gradually, he felt that something was not quite right. His car went in front, followed by the car that Zhang Yuzi and the others were riding in, but he had already discerned that the sound of hooves didn't stop there, and there was another car behind. I didn't think so at first. After all, there is only one way back to the city, and there are still many carriages behind. But after entering the city, the roads lead in all directions, and there are many people. If you stop for a while, you should not be able to keep up. It makes no sense that the car is still behind. He also didn't know what the car was trying to do, but whatever he wanted to do, it was right not to let him do it. He suddenly turned and jumped up, hitting a small pebble backwards in his hand. Then he landed steadily on the carriage and continued to drive. He heard a horse neighing suddenly from behind, and the corner of Lin Chuo's mouth twitched slightly as he drove the carriage and turned to the next street. When the carriage stopped at the entrance of Rengzintang, Lin Chuo paid attention to the back, and the carriage had disappeared. Ahu opened the side door, and he hurriedly drove the car in. Sister-in-law Usman thus had already prepared dishes. Seeing them coming back, she quickly added firewood and cooked. Gu Yunjiao took the kite back to the house and put the kite. She couldn't help sitting by the window thinking about it. Just after entering the city, the wind blew the curtain, and she just took a look out. She saw a woman in a jingchai cloth skirt, struggling with a wooden barrel to walk along the road. At that time, she felt that this woman was very similar to Gu Mei. But the distance was too far, and she could only see a side profile, and was covered by her hair, and she wasn't sure if it was Gu Mei. However, Gu Yunjiao threw it away after thinking about it. To Gu Mei, she believed that she had done her best. What kind of life she will live in the future is her own life and has nothing to do with her. At this moment, Gu Mei was drying clothes in a yard. She just went to the river to wash her clothes and came back. She now lives at her aunt's house. It's just that the situation at my aunt's family is not good now. When she came, her uncle was bedridden, and her aunt was thinking about where to borrow some money to see her doctor. After thinking about it for 3 days, Gu Mei took out all the money on her body and gave it to her aunt. Aunt and cousin both knelt down to her. With silver to see a doctor, my uncle finally got his life back, but he still couldn't work and needed to rest in bed. And the family has no money to eat. Gu Mei used all her jewelry and clothes as food, and bought rice and grain to eat. Now she is wearing her aunt's old clothes. She and her aunt went around picking up some starching clothes every day. My 13-year-old cousin goes to the wharf every day to fight bags and earn some copper money back. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 245. Gu Mei also asked himself why he did this. The silver jewelry and clothes in her hand add up to more than 40 taels. Save a little bit, maybe 10 years is enough. But she still gave the money. She thought she might be atonement. Atonement for the sin of abandoning his younger brother and sister in his previous life and deceiving his younger brother and sister in this life. She knew that Gu Yunjiao and Xiao Chuan were living well now, and they didn't need her atonement. Then she should treat the rest of her relatives well. Thinking of Gu Yunjiao, Gu Mei felt ashamed again. She had also asked herself countless times, if she and Gu Yunjiao were in different places, would she go and save Gu Yunjiao? Of course not. She will take 500 taels of silver to buy beautiful clothes and jewelry, and maybe buy some land. In short, she will rely on this silver to live a life of worry-free clothing and food. As for the younger brother and sister, what is it about her? She didn't understand why Gu Yunjiao was so stupid. My sister is also not good to her, what does she want? Gu Mei can only be attributed to the fact that Yunjiao is like a father, who is kind and pays attention to family affection. She also knew that Gu Yunjiao was no longer the Gu Yunjiao she used to be, and maybe she was reborn just like her. Otherwise, the 500 taels of silver cannot be explained. She only hopes now that her sister and brother will be safe and happy in this life. As for the mother who was as selfish and cold as hers, she didn't bother to hold grudges. Life is your choice. And now life, she feels very good. She no longer paints her eyebrows, wears grey clothes every day, and earns a bite of food with her own hands, which she thinks is better than relying on men. She told her aunt that she didn't plan to marry again in her life, and her aunt said that it was fine if she didn't marry, she would just live at home for the rest of her life. Several rows of ropes were pulled in the yard to dry the clothes, and Gume folded the clothes collected in the house neatly. She took a furoshiki and packed her clothes, and said to her aunt who was mending her clothes in the house, "I'm going to deliver the clothes." The aunt's answer came from the house, "Well, be careful on the road." Gume went out with her bag, and she went from house to house, quickly finishing all the clothes for a spin. She turned to a side street, which came to an end, turned another corner, and was home. At this moment, Gume saw a man. The man she married in her previous life. The man was still what she remembered, in his 20s, his skin was slightly dark, his chin was wide, and his eyebrows and nose were the shapes she liked. Gume's footsteps stopped immediately, she watched the man approach step by step, her tears dripped down like beads with a broken thread. She couldn't control her emotions any longer, squatted on the ground, buried her head, and cried. Wang Hao saw Gume from a distance. He always felt that this girl was a little familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere. Who knew that the girl looked at her, as if she was distraught, and then she just burst into tears. Wang Hao was a little flustered. He somehow felt that the girl crying had something to do with him. He walked up to the girl, at a loss, and said softly, "Are you okay, girl?" Gume couldn't help herself from crying. I don't know how long it took, her legs were numb from squatting, and she wiped away her tears and got up. Wang Hao was still there, and he looked at her nervously, hesitating to say anything. Gume, as if nothing had happened just now, lowered her eyes and walked quickly. Wang Hao hesitated for a moment, then suddenly caught up, "Girl, I think you feel very kind. Let me take the liberty to ask, is the girl married?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 246. Gume stood there like a log with swollen eyes. Wang Hao said with some embarrassment, "Miss, please don't take offense. I understand that asking this is an offense to the girl, but I'm afraid that if the girl leaves, I will never meet the girl again. My wife has been dead for 2 years, leaving behind a 2-year-old son. I know I'm not worthy of a girl, but as soon as I see a girl, I am happy with you. If the girl she doesn't get married, I don't know." Gume stood there and listened to Wang Hao's words, then left without looking back. As I walked, tears streamed down like a gate had been opened. Looking back on her now, the happiest and most comfortable days in her 2 lives were the 2 years when Wang Hao was together. Although Xiaozu was good to her, he would be considerate without Wang Hao. Destiny really favored her. To meet a good man like Wang Hao, she lost such a good man herself. But she can't go back. She couldn't even imagine how Wang Hao would look at her if he knew that she was caught. Gume's tears flowed more and more fiercely, and she walked faster and faster. Wang Hao chased Gume for a while and saw her turn into an alley. He is not good at chasing after him. The girl may have gone home. They met by chance, and he has been in a lifetime. He will say those words today, and he has mustered up a lot of courage. He wandered around the alley for a while, looked back reluctantly, and then left. He came to Xiangcheng to buy medicinal materials and lived in a nearby inn. When Gume went back, her aunt was sitting at the door of the kitchen picking vegetables. When she saw her coming in with tears in her eyes, she hurriedly asked her, "What's wrong? Someone bullied you?" Gu Mei shook his head, ran back to his room, closed the door, and threw himself on the bed crying. The cry was buried in the quilt, sobbing and whimpering. This day, Gu Yunjiao was making medicines in the West Wing again. Only the sister-in-law of Osman Thus and Yingzi lived in the West Wing. The two vacant rooms were opened up by Gu Yunjiao, and they were specially used to store some medicinal materials, and she would also dispense medicines here. When dispensing medicine, she always closes the door and enters the medicine storehouse for configuration. The light in the medicine storehouse is always on, and the powder mixer is always powered on. It is also convenient to configure the medicine powder. This time she configured YNBO. Recently, perhaps because Xiangang came to take care of the business, this medicine for bruises and injuries sold very quickly. The formula of BO is a state secret in modern times. Sakura country has deliberately taken away many prescriptions of Chinese patent medicines in China, and once wanted to take away the formula of BO. Fortunately, the state has protected it. After that, Sakura Kingdom still didn't give up, and took BO to conduct research, trying to crack the formula. In the end, it was probably researched that there were drugs such as Panax noto ginseng, musk, borneol, etc., and the formula they developed was also announced. The state official only stood up and said, "Incorrect." The reason why Gu Yunjiao knew the formula was that the state specially gave the formula to her grandfather to study. When Grandpa told Gu Yunjiao the formula, he also said that he can study this formula, but he must not leak the formula to anyone. In a different time and space, Gu Yunjiao also hopes that these secret recipes can bring some good news to the people. After finishing the powder, Gu Yunjiao came out of the space. She opened the door, called Atai in, pointed at the powder and said, "Sift the powder, grind it repeatedly, and sieve it repeatedly." Atai honestly went to sieve the medicine and grind the medicine. She came out of the West Wing, and Luzu came in at the front. "Master, someone is looking for Zhang Zioki." Gu Yunjiao walked out quickly, and when she walked outside, she saw Zheng Juren holding a folding fan, standing in the shop looking around. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 247. Zheng Juren turned his head to see Gu Yunjiao, gave her a long bow with a smile, then straightened up and said with a smile, "I'm Yuji's classmate, and the girl and I meet for the third time today." When he came back from viewing the flowers that day, after his carriage was startled, the horse seemed to know that the danger was coming from the front, raised its front hooves and refused to move forward. It was useless for the coachman to beat him. Zheng Juren lost track of Gu Yunjiao and the others, so he returned to his residence angrily, and asked people to ask around, and finally found out the news. No, he came to the door when he got the news. Gu Yunjiao didn't know what this person was going to do. Seeing him staring at her all the time, she was a little disgusted. He casually blessed him and said lightly, "If you want to find you, sir, just go to the academy to find him." Zheng Juren smiled and shook his head. "Actually, I'm here to find the girl today." He suddenly approached Gu Yunjiao and lowered his voice, "Since I met the girl in Dalan that day, I have been haunted by my dreams, and I will never forget it for a moment." Gu Yunjiao looked at him in surprise and quickly took a few steps back. In the corner, Lin Chuo frowned and looked over. Although he didn't know what the man was talking about, his eyes weren't quite right, and he was too close to Dr. Gu. He quietly got up and walked to the door, which was close to Gu Yunjiao, so he would respond to anything in time. Gu Yunjiao said sternly, "I don't know what your teacher means when you say this." "I have nothing to say to you, sir, please come back." Zheng Juren was still smiling, and approached Gu Yunjiao again. "I'm from Chunlin County, and I've heard about Sister Ling long ago. The Gu family's family style can be imagined. What is the seriousness of Dr. Gu and me?" Gu Yunjiao was instantly furious, and just as she was about to speak, Zheng Jurun changed her words again. However, the girl and sister Ling are still different. Otherwise I wouldn't have made this trip. Gu Yunjiao suppressed her anger. Oh, what are you doing here, sir? Zheng Jurun smiled frivolously. The girl still has a bit of beauty. I heard that you are also skilled in medicine. I don't think you are a widow. I am willing to take you in a small sedan chair and be my third concubine. He paused for a while. Maybe the girl doesn't know yet, but now I have a reputation on my body. After he finished speaking, he shook his fan proudly. Gu Yunjiao was so angry that she lost her words, and her chest wobbled. Zheng Jurun saw that Gu Yunjiao didn't say a word, and only thought she agreed, and said with a smile, in the future, this shop can continue to open. However, the money earned still has to be handed over to the family. Ever since he found out that Gu Yunjiao is Rengzentang's owner, he has been overjoyed, and taking him as a concubine means that both beauty and money are in the bag. He smiled slyly, and picked his fan to Gu Yunjiao's chin. Don't worry, I will definitely love you in the future. Gu Yunjiao tilted her head to avoid the disgusting fan, then turned around and left. Walk and look around. Lin Chuo heard Zheng Jurun's words completely. Although he hated Zheng Jurun's frivolous words, especially when Zheng Jurun used a fan to pick Gu Yunjiao's chin, he couldn't help but want to beat him. However, Gu Yunjiao didn't make a statement, and he was not sure about Gu Yunjiao's attitude. He still remembered that he was Gu Yunjiao's bodyguard, so he held back and didn't move. Seeing Gu Yunjiao walking with her head down as if she was looking for something, she hurriedly asked, "What is Dr. Gu looking for?" Gu Yunjiao's face flushed red, she gritted her teeth, and finally squeezed out a sentence, "Find a stick or a knife, I want to hit someone. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 248. Only then did Lin Chuo understand that Dr. Gu was so angry that he was speechless. He said, "Dr. Gu is not the kind of woman who would be a concubine." Lin Chuo suddenly strode forward. "Dr. Gu doesn't need to look for a stick, carefully hurt your hand. It's natural for me to do this kind of thing." As soon as he moved, he came to Zheng Jurun, and then punched Zheng Jurun in the face. This time, it hit Zheng Jurun's nose bone firmly, and only a crisp sound was heard. Zheng Jurun staggered back a few steps, blood dripping from his nose. Then Lin Chuo punched Zheng Jurun in the cheek again, and the bloody teeth flew out of Zheng Jurun's mouth. Zheng Jurun turned half a circle and threw himself to the ground. Gu Yunjiao stood not far away and watched, and then slowly let out a sigh of turbidity. Ahu has been standing at the door, but he didn't hear Zheng Jurun's shameless words. However, when he saw his master hitting someone, he came in and kicked Zheng Jurun a few times. Zheng Jurun threw himself on the ground holding his head tightly, curled his body into a ball, and begged for mercy, "Stop hitting, don't hit." There was a lively fight in the house, and many people passing by outside stopped to watch. Gu Yunjiao frowned slightly. This one-sided beating makes it easy for those who don't know what to do to misunderstand. She winked at Lin Chuo. Lin Chuo lifted Zheng Jurun's back collar, lifted him in like a dead pig, and threw it in the yard. Chen Shi, who was embroidering under the corridor, Osman Thus, who was washing vegetables at the door of the kitchen, and Laoju, who was frying medicine outside the west wing, all looked over. Gu Yunjiao followed her in, and saw Lin Chuo raised Zheng Jurun again. "Don't pee and see what you are, you really dare to think about it." He squatted down, narrowed his eyes, and said in a low voice, "Listen to me, what you just said. If you ask me to hear a word in the Xiang Chang, I will definitely knock out your mouth full of teeth and cut off your tongue, so that you will never have a chance to speak again." He heard what Zheng Jurun said about Gu's family style. Zheng Jurun held his head and said vaguely, I dare not, I promise not to say anything." He is still confused now. He didn't even know how he was beaten. he was still very aggrieved, and if he didn't agree, he wouldn't agree. Why would he beat someone? Lin Chuo then added, remember your words. Otherwise, taking your life is a matter of moving your fingers. Zheng Juren had no doubts about Lin Chuo's words. He repeatedly kowtowed, don't dare, don't dare. Lin Chuo shouted, go away. Zheng Juren stumbled up from the ground and ran forward. Lin Chuo scolded, go over there, go through the back door. Running out with such a bloody face would affect Ren Xintang's reputation. Zheng Juren limped out through the back door. Lin Chuo gave Ahu a wink, and Ahu immediately went out through the back door. At this time, Chen Shi, who had watched the play for a long time, finally said, isn't this Zheng Juren, Saburo's classmate? What did he do? Beat him. Gu Yunjiao pursed her lips. She didn't really want to say anything, but Chen Shi asked, she couldn't help but answer. At this time, Lin Chuo said, it's nothing, this person is not a good person and offended Dr. Gu. Chen Shi was stunned for a moment, then glanced at Gu Yunjiao again, and hurriedly said, then we should fight well. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 249. Gu Yunjiao made a puchi. She was amused by Chen's unprincipled maintenance. Obviously she doesn't know anything, anyway, she just doesn't help her parents. Seeing her smile, Chen Shi was also happy. Just now Yunjiao's face was scary. Outside, Ahu has quietly fallen onto Zheng Juren. Zheng Juren stumbled out of the back door and walked not far. When he arrived at the Kailan Hall, he asked Dr. Zhang for a look, prescribed some medicine, and asked the man to call a carriage for him, so he got in the car and left. Ahu fell all the way to Zheng Juren to his residence. Zheng Juren now sits in the house of a rich man named Jian, teaching his son to read. His family was not in a good financial situation. After winning the lift, many people of this clan came to depend on him. He has a lot of land in his name, and someone gave him a house. It used to be a good day, but Zheng Juren felt that now his identity is different, and he should have some pomp. He first married 2 concubines in one go, and then the concubines coaxed him to marry a lot of money to buy clothes and jewelry, and soon he was stretched out. It happened that someone introduced him to the house of the rich man in Xiangcheng. 5 taels of silver per month, 2 sets of clothes per season, and other packages and gifts for the new year and the festival. Zheng Juren thought about it and came. The courtyard where he lives has a back door that just leads to the back street. He entered through the back door and hurriedly entered the small courtyard where he lived. Ahu, who was like a ghost, also flashed in, and then a few jumped up to the roof. Zheng Juren entered the house with the medicine, and a woman greeted him. The woman was startled when she saw the blood on his face. Husband, what's wrong? Zheng Juren said with a gloomy face, go out and fall. He pointed to the medicine, go and fry the medicine. The woman hurried out. Zheng Juren sat on the chair himself, and while rubbing his swollen cheeks, he cursed fiercely, little Biozi, how dare you let someone beat me? I will not take this revenge, I swear I will not be a human being. Ahu on the roof narrowed his eyes when he heard the voice below. He quietly lifted a tile and put his eyes on it and looked down. Zheng Juren cursed a few times, and felt pain all over his body. While moaning, he went to the inner room and lay on the bed. He lay on the bed for a while, then suddenly sat up, took the pen and ink, and wrote a piece of writing. Ahu was quietly lifting a tile on the roof. He put his eyes on the gap and looked down. It was a little difficult for him to see, but he still managed to see clearly. This situation was reported to Gu Yunjiao. It was said that Gu Yunjiao condoned the murders of her servants, ignored the imperial court, and beat up Juren at will. Ahu was lying on the roof, intending to steal the paper and tear it up. On second thought, he can write again after tearing it up. Then Ahu heard Zheng Juren muttering, "I will go to the Yamen to sue you tomorrow. You can't eat and walk around." Ahu thought for a while, quietly covered the tile, and then quietly left. Zhang Yuzi went home in the evening. After dinner, Lin Chuo gave Zhang Yuzi a wink, and Zhang Yuzi followed Lin Chuo upstairs. Lin Chuo closed the door, and told about Zheng Juren's visit today, and also about the lawsuit. Zhang Yuzi's handsome face twisted. "Okay, what a Zheng Juren, I haven't had a chance to settle accounts with him, and he's here to provoke me again." Lin Chuo narrowed his eyes. "Why, did you have quarrels before?" Zhang Yuzi pondered for a moment, and then talked about his Chiu Wei first taking laxatives, and then being pushed down from the upstairs. "The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 250. Zhang Yuzi pondered for a moment, and then talked about his Chiu Wei first taking laxatives, and then being pushed down from the upstairs. Lin Chuo slapped the table heavily. How can there be such a sinister and vicious person in the world? He looked at Zhang Yuzi. "Brother Zhang, what are you going to do?" "Then Zheng Juren will go to the Yamen tomorrow to file a complaint." Zhang Yuzi said slowly, "It's not a big deal about the complaint, I beg the Lord to post Zhang and it should be fine. It's Zheng Juren, it's a scourge to keep it after all." Lin Chuo raised his eyebrows. "Is it necessary to ask the Lord for such a thing and oh favor?" Zhang Yuzi didn't speak, and asking King Kong at this moment was killing two birds with one stone for him. He just gave King Kong a chance to be kind to him. King Kong wants to take him under his command. After several contacts, he feels that King Kong is a good person. He will also need help in the officialdom in the future, and he is planning to hand over one ladder for him. Lin Chuo stood up and walked around the room a few times. "Since this person once intended to murder Brother Zhang, I think it's better to get rid of this person." Zhang Yuzi frowned slightly. "It will be a matter of time to get rid of him, but not now. If someone were to die, the government would definitely investigate, and then Ren Xintang would definitely be involved. Today, Zheng Juren came here, was beaten in the shop, and went out to get medicine in Kylin Hall. Everyone saw it. This is impossible to hide." Lin Chuo narrowed his eyes. "So, how many more days do you have to let that Zheng Juren live?" Zhang Yuzi said coldly, "That's all. However, he is so horny, you can give him some hardships first. If he is unlucky, maybe we won't have to do it in the future." Lin Chuo raised his eyebrows. "Brother Zhang has an idea." Zhang Yuzi nodded. Lin Chuo was convinced of Zhang Yuzi's mind. He smiled. "What Brother Zhang wants to do, I'll go with you." Zhang Yuzi said a few words to Lin Chuo in a low voice. Lin Chuo nodded. "You don't need me to come forward for this matter, just let Ahu do it." He raised his voice to call Ahu, and whispered a few words. Then Zhang Yuzi took out 2 100-tael silver notes and handed them to Ahu. Ahu nodded, went back to the house and dressed himself up first, then went out. Zhang Yuzi also packed up and went to Kong Wangfu. Ahu went out and went straight to Chunxiang Tower. He asked for a room first, and then asked Duke Gui to call the prostitute over. The old bastard came over with a smile. "Yo, this young man, don't you despise our sister here? What do you want to do with the old lady?" The bastard leaned on Ahu as he spoke. Ahu hurriedly avoided it, hurriedly closed the door, and frowned. "Sit down, I have a serious business to discuss with you." Ahu sat down at the table, and the old man squinted and sat down. Ahu took out a silver note from his arms and placed it on the table. The old man looked at the amount above, his eyes lit up, and he reached out to take it. Ahu quickly suppressed the banknote and said in a low voice, "Do what I asked you to do, this banknote is yours." The old man's expression also became serious. "Young master, please speak." Ahu whispered, "Do you have a sick girl here?" The old man's face changed. Guests, don't talk nonsense, our girls here will ask a doctor to diagnose the ping and pulse after a while, and usually wash them with water, how can they get sick? Ahu put away the silver note on the table, forget it, then I'll go to Lishun courtyard and ask. He got up after speaking.